The lawyer's voice cut through the room like a knife. "And the entire estate, every dollar, every property, every share, goes to Sophia Bennett." My mother's champagne smile shattered. My father's confident nod froze mid-motion. They'd driven 6 hours expecting millions. What they got instead was a clause so brutal it would ruin them in ways they never saw coming. Here's my question. If the parents who abandoned you suddenly reappeared when you inherited millions, would you give them a single cent? Or would you let them destroy themselves trying to take it? Stay until the end, because what my uncle wrote in that will didn't just protect my inheritance. It became a trap my parents walked straight into, and the consequences were beautiful. Hey everyone, my name is Sophia Bennett, and this is the story of how the two people who threw me away at 16 came crawling back the moment they heard the word millions. And how my uncle's final gift made sure they could never touch a dime. Before we get into this, if you've ever dealt with family who only showed up when money was involved, hit that like button right now. Subscribe because this story gets wild. We're talking restraining orders, arrests, and a will so ironclad it made my parents' greed backfire spectacularly. And drop a comment below. Would you help parents who abandoned you if they begged for money years later? I need to know where you stand on this. Now let me take you back to where it all started. When the lawyer opened my uncle's will, my mom leaned back in her chair like she already owned the place. "Relax, Sophia," she laughed. "We're family. Of course we'll all share the millions." My dad sat beside her, nodding like the money was already in his pocket. The last time they'd looked that sure of themselves, I was 16 and they were walking out of our tiny rental, leaving an empty fridge, a dead phone, and a note that basically said, "You'll figure it out." I did figure it out, just not the way they expected. Years later, that life is the reason I was sitting in a conference room in downtown Chicago, staring at the two people who had thrown me away, now pretending they had lovingly raised me. My mom smiled at the lawyer, that bright fake smile she used to save for church ladies and lottery tickets. "Haha, we're family, right?" she said. "Let's not make this complicated." But it was already complicated. The lawyer cleared his throat, flipped to the final page, and started reading a part of the will my parents didn't even know existed. Their smiles froze before he finished the first sentence. They thought they'd walked into easy money. They had no idea my uncle had left one last trap in the form of a secret clause. Stay with me, because what he wrote there didn't just ruin their payday. It blew up their entire lives. Before my parents walked out, our life in that little town by Lake Michigan looked normal from the outside. We had cheap barbecue grills in the driveway, neighbors who waved from their porches, and summer evenings with the sound of kids riding their bikes past our window. Inside our house, it was a different story. My dad Robert was supposed to be a mechanic at the local garage, but most weekends he disappeared to the casino and came back smelling like beer and desperation. My mom Karen used to work at the grocery store, then slowly stopped showing up. She spent her days sunk into the couch, scrolling on her phone or watching reality shows, barely noticing when I came or went. At first, we still had our little traditions. Pancakes on Sunday mornings, movies on the couch with whatever snacks we could afford. Then the arguments about money got louder. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter. The fridge went from full to half full to almost empty. Mom would wave her hand toward the pantry and say, "There's ramen. You'll be fine." So I got a job at the ice cream shop after school, scooping cones for kids who never had to worry if there'd be dinner that night. I handed my paycheck to my mom, hoping it would help. It disappeared into bills and gas and my dad's casino trips. One Tuesday morning in winter, I woke up to a silence that felt wrong, even for our house. No TV. No dishes clinking. No fake arguments about whose turn it was to buy groceries. The bed in their room was made, which never happened. The closet doors were half open and most of their clothes were gone. In the kitchen, the fridge light glowed over a carton of milk gone sour and a few wilted vegetables. On the table there was a single folded piece of paper with my name on it. "Sophia, we can't do this anymore. Your uncle will take care of you. We're sorry. Take care of yourself." I stared at the words until they blurred. There was no money. No plan. Their phones went straight to voicemail. By day 3, the landlord was banging on the door, demanding rent I could never pay. When I said my parents were gone, he looked at me like I was lying. "You're 16, he said. "You can't just stay here alone. Either you pay or I call someone." In the end, I was the one who called. I went to the school counselor's office, hands shaking, and told her everything. Within hours, a woman from social services showed up at the apartment with a clipboard and calm eyes. She listened, took photos of the empty fridge, the note, the unpaid bills. Then she said, "We've contacted a relative. He's agreed to take you in." That was the first time I heard his name spoken like it mattered to me. William, my dad's older brother. The one they always called distant, obsessed with money and computers. The one they said forgot what real life looks like. When he arrived, he didn't hug me or ask how I felt. He just glanced around the apartment, at the peeling paint and the sagging couch, then looked at me. "Pack what you need," he said. "Anything you actually use. We're leaving today." I grabbed a duffel bag stuffed in some clothes, my school notebooks, and the only photo I had of us from before everything fell apart. As I stepped out of that apartment and into his sleek black car, I had no idea if I was being rescued or just relocated. All I knew was that my parents were gone, and a man who barely knew me had decided I was now his responsibility. If you're still watching, hit that like button, because what happens next is where my uncle transforms me from a forgotten kid into someone my parents would one day be terrified to face. Subscribe so you don't miss how this all leads to that courtroom showdown. And comment. Have you ever been saved by someone who wasn't even obligated to help you? Tell me your story. Chicago didn't feel real the first time I saw it. The highway lights, the endless glass towers in the distance, the way everything moved faster than my thoughts. William drove in silence, his hands steady on the wheel, the car humming so quietly I could hear my own heartbeat. When we finally turned off the main road into a quiet suburb, I thought he'd made a wrong turn. The houses here had manicured lawns, fresh paint, and driveways without cracks. His place looked like something from a tech magazine. Clean lines, big windows, a front door that probably cost more than our old car. Inside, everything smelled like coffee and something expensive I couldn't name. "Shoes off at the door," he said, already towing out of his. "We keep things clean here." "Okay," I muttered, clutching my duffel like a shield. He showed me a guest room that was suddenly my room, with a real bed, a desk, a closet that wasn't already full of someone else's life. "You'll start school here," he said. "But first, we're going to get some structure in place." That was William's favorite word, structure. Over the next few days, he laid out my new life like a project plan. Wake up at 6:30, breakfast at 7, school homework plus 1 hour every night learning something useful, his words. Usually through some online course about coding, time management, or cybersecurity basics. Dinner at 7 sharp, no phones at the table, no staying up all night scrolling. If I broke a rule, he didn't yell. He just adjusted my privileges like he was tweaking settings on a computer. Late to dinner? No Netflix for the week. Used his work laptop without asking? Wi-Fi access only in the kitchen in plain sight. "That's not fair," I snapped once when he cut off my social media for 3 days. "Life isn't fair," he said calmly, not looking up from his email. "But actions still have consequences. I'm teaching you to control the part you can." I tried to push back. I forgot the dinner time. I pretended not to hear my alarm. I snapped at him for treating me like some employee he had to manage. He never raised his voice. He just kept rearranging the consequences until it was easier to follow the rules than fight them. Little by little, the house stopped feeling like a hotel and started feeling like something scarier. Stable. On Saturdays, he sometimes took me to his office downtown. While he sat in glass-walled conference rooms talking about contracts and security audits, I sat in a corner chair with my homework, pretending not to listen. But I watched the way he worked, how he stayed quiet when other people argued, how he asked 1 or 2 questions that changed the direction of the whole meeting. On the drive home one day, I asked, "How did you know that guy was lying about those numbers?" William glanced at me through the rearview mirror. He looked at the table when I mentioned penalties. He said, "People who are telling the truth get annoyed when you doubt them. Liars get nervous." It was the closest thing to a life lesson he'd ever given me. One night, a few weeks after I moved in, I was sitting on my bed scrolling through old photos on my cracked phone. There weren't many, but the few we had were loaded with ghosts. My parents smiling over pancakes, my dad with his arm around me at a school play, things that felt fake now. My eyes burned. My chest got tight. And before I could stop it, the tears came. I didn't hear William at the door until he spoke. "Sophia." I jumped and wiped my face with the back of my hand. "I'm fine," I said automatically. He didn't argue. He just walked in, set a box of tissues on the nightstand, and sat in the desk chair across from me. He didn't ask what was wrong or tell me it would all be okay. He didn't try to fix it. He just stayed. 10 minutes. 20. Long enough for the worst of the storm inside my chest to pass. When I finally looked up, he stood. "You have school tomorrow," he said. "Try to sleep. We'll talk about getting you into a better program soon. You can do more than just survive." After he left, I lay there staring at the ceiling. My parents had left me with a note and an empty fridge. William had given me rules, routines, and a quiet chair in the corner of my sadness. I still didn't fully trust him, but for the first time my life had a shape. I had no idea that structure was his way of building me into someone who could stand on her own, with or without him. Alright, if you're hooked, smash that like button, because what happens next is where William pushes me harder than anyone ever has. And it's exactly what I needed. Subscribe so you don't miss how this quiet, disciplined life turns into millions and a courtroom showdown. Comment below, have you ever had someone give you tough love that changed your life? Let me know. William did not believe in doing the bare minimum for anything, including my education. A few weeks after I'd settled into his house, he slid a thick packet across the dinner table while I ate pasta. "Placement tests," he said. "You're not staying at the local public school. You're capable of more." I wanted to roll my eyes, but when I flipped through the papers, there was a small, unexpected spark inside me. The questions were hard but not impossible, like someone was finally expecting me to use my brain instead of just survive another day. A month later, I was walking through the glass doors of Riverside Preparatory, a private school in Chicago where the parking lot was full of SUVs and kids talked about their summer internships like it was normal. My thrift store jeans and worn backpack stuck out immediately. In my old school, just showing up counted as effort. Here, teachers handed out project rubrics that looked like corporate reports, and students argued with them using words like data-driven and competitive advantage. My schedule was brutal. Advanced math, computer science, English lit, group projects that lasted weeks. I swallowed my pride and showed William my first round of grades, which were solidly average. "I'm not like these kids," I muttered. "They've had tutors since they were 5. He scanned the report card, then set it down. "Good," he said. "Now you know the gap. Data is only useful if you act on it." Instead of sympathy, he gave me structure again. We built a study schedule hour by hour. If I wanted extra screen time or a ride somewhere, I had to show him my progress. When I nearly failed my first coding project, he didn't tell me I was smart and special. He sat me at the kitchen table with his laptop and said, "Show me your errors." We went line by line until I understood what I'd done wrong. "Failure is not a verdict," he said, closing the laptop. "It's feedback. Use it." Slowly things shifted. I formed a small study group after class with a few students who didn't roll their eyes when I took notes like my life depended on it. I stopped flinching when teachers called on me. By senior year, I was near the top of my computer science class, which still felt unreal for the girl who used to do homework with the TV blasting in the background. Then came college applications. I circled safe schools on the list, places close to Chicago where I could stay near the only stability I'd known. William circled names I thought were out of my league. Stanford. "Hey, you're insane," I told him. "Those schools are for geniuses or people whose parents donate buildings. And for kids who clawed their way up from nothing," he replied. "Which category you choose is up to you." We argued. I said I didn't want to leave. He said comfort was a terrible reason to stay small. One night, after a particularly bad fight, he sat at the edge of the dining table and told me something he'd never said clearly before. "My brother, your father, had once been brilliant at anything mechanical. He could have been an engineer, an inventor," William said, "but he chose quick money, gambling, shortcuts. I watched him waste every chance he had. I'm not going to watch that happen twice." I applied. Months later, an email popped up on my phone while I was studying in the library. I opened it and stared. Stanford. Full of palm trees and opportunity and a future that didn't involve looking over my shoulder for overdue bills. William read the letter in silence, then handed me a new laptop a week later. "Tool, not a toy," he said. "Use it to build something." College was another shock, but this time I was ready. I carried William's voice into every group project, every late-night hackathon, every networking event where I felt out of place. I interned at startups in Silicon Valley and learned to speak the language of investors and founders. When I graduated, offers came in from tech companies on both coasts. I turned them down. Instead, I flew back to Chicago, walked into William's office and told him I wanted to work for him. "Then you're not my niece at work," he said. "You're part of the team." You'll start at the bottom and earn every step. I did. I coded. Stayed late. Made mistakes. Fixed them. Led small teams then bigger ones. By the time I was 28, I was running major projects, helping shift our company into cloud security and AI, the kind of moves that made investors pay attention. It was a strange kind of full circle. The girl nobody wanted had become a woman people listened to. I thought that meant the past was finally just a story I'd outgrown. I had no idea how quickly life was about to remind me that nothing stays stable forever. If this story is resonating with you, hit that like button right now and subscribe, because what happens next breaks my heart and sets up the most brutal reading you've ever heard. Comment: have you ever had a mentor who pushed you to be better? Let me know their name. The night everything shifted started out painfully normal. I came home late from the office, still wired from a big client presentation, and found William at the dining table with 2 plates already set, steak and roasted vegetables cooling on white porcelain. He never waited to eat. If you were late, that was your problem. That night he did. You're 5 minutes behind schedule, he said. But there was no real bite to it. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the way we often did, both of us replaying our days in our heads. Then he put his fork down, folded his hands, and looked at me in a way that made my chest go tight. Sophia, he said. I got some test results back. I laughed once, weakly. You go to the doctor? He didn't smile. Pancreatic cancer. Late stage. They can't cure it. They can only slow it down. The words felt like they belonged in someone else's life, not mine. I stared at him, waiting for him to say it was a dark joke. William didn't joke. Okay, I said finally, because my brain couldn't come up with anything better. So what do we do? His answer was the most William thing he could have said. We treat it like a project. Limited time, clear priorities. Within days, he had a color-coded folder on the kitchen counter filled with appointment schedules, treatment options, and research articles. I sat beside him in hospital waiting rooms while he read through documents like they were contracts, asking doctors pointed questions about risk and reward. Chemo days became part of our new schedule. I drove him to one of the top cancer centers in Chicago, kept a notebook of symptoms and side effects, and argued with insurance reps on the phone when they tried to deny coverage for something his doctors said he needed. At home, I shifted his diet, learned how to cook food he could actually tolerate, and kept track of his meds like they were production servers I couldn't let fail. At work, the shift was even bigger. William started handing me responsibilities he'd always kept for himself. First it was a few client meetings he was too tired to attend. Then it was entire projects, then budget approvals, then strategy calls with investors. You're already doing the work, he told me one afternoon as we sat in his office, the city skyline glowing behind him. We might as well make it official. He reminded me of something that had happened years earlier when I just turned 18. He'd taken me to the courthouse on a gray Monday with no explanation, handed me a pen, and signed a stack of papers that legally made him my adoptive father. You're not an extra mouth to feed, he'd said back then. You're my responsibility. This just matches the paperwork to reality. Now, facing the kind of timeline no one wants, he was doing the same thing with the business and everything else. Matching the paperwork to reality. The company will be fine in your hands, he said. You understand how it works and why it works. That's more than I can say for half the people in this building. His body got weaker, but his brain stayed sharp for longer than I expected. Some nights he'd sit in his recliner with a blanket over his legs, laptop open, listening while I walked him through quarterly numbers and staffing plans. Other nights he'd close the laptop and ask me about things he'd never had time for before. Are you happy here? He asked once. Not with the company, with your life. I thought about the girl in the empty apartment with the rotten milk and the note on the table. Yeah, I said. I am. Because of you. A small, tired smile touched his mouth. Good. Then I didn't screw it up completely. 10 months after that first conversation at the dinner table, William died at home, just like he wanted. No machines. No hospital room. Just the quiet hum of the house and my hand holding his. The funeral was small and efficient, like William himself. A few relatives I barely knew. A lot of coworkers and clients with polished shoes and red eyes. People told stories about his toughness, his discipline, the way he could stare at a contract and see the one line no one else noticed. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't talk about business. I talked about a man who had walked into a failing life and refused to let it fail, about pancakes replaced by structure, Chaos replaced by plans, survival replaced by purpose. After everyone left, I stood alone by the grave for a long time, my breath clouding in the cold air. The person my parents called cold and distant had been the only one who showed up. A few weeks later, when the rawest edge of the grief had dulled into something heavy and constant, the phone rang in my office. It was William's lawyer, Mr. Harrison, asking me to come in for the reading of the will. I assumed it would be simple. William had never been sentimental about money. He saw it as a tool like the laptop he bought me when I got into Stanford. I figured there would be some legal language about the house, the company, maybe a charitable donation or two. I did not expect to walk into that conference room, sit down at the long polished table, and see my mother and father already there, dressed like they were about to close a deal. For the second time in my life, my past had arrived without warning. This time, it was staring at the fortune William had left behind, and acting like it already belonged to them. Alright, if you're still here, hit that like button and subscribe, because what happens in this will reading is legendary. My uncle didn't just protect me, he set a trap so perfect my parents walked straight into it. Comment. What would you do if the parents who abandoned you showed up at an inheritance reading? Me know. For a second I thought I'd walked into the wrong office. My mother was sitting at the long conference table in a navy dress she definitely hadn't bought at our old discount mall, her hair smoothed back, makeup done like she was going on TV. My father wore a gray suit that didn't quite fit, but he tugged at the cuffs like he was used to it. They both turned when I came in. Sophia, my mom said loud and bright like we met for brunch every week. You look successful. My dad gave a little awkward laugh. We're so proud of you, kiddo. Proud. The word tasted sour. Mr. Harrison, the lawyer, motioned for me to sit. I took a chair on the opposite side of the table from them. The thick folder in front of him had William's name on the tab. My mother leaned back, looking around the polished room, then at me. You must be so overwhelmed, she said, voice dripping with fake sympathy. It's a lot. The house, the company, all the, what did you call it? She glanced at my father. Assets, he supplied, nodding. Yeah, the assets. She smiled at me like we were co-conspirators. Don't worry, we're family. We'll figure it out together. We'll all share the millions. Right there was no warm-up. No apology. Not even a real hello. Just straight to the money. Mr. Harrison adjusted his glasses, his face neutral. If everyone is ready, I'll begin. He read through the boring parts first. William's full name, the dates, the legal language about capacity and intent. My parents barely listened. They were waiting for the numbers. When he finally got there, the room shifted. The primary residence. The lake house. Various investment accounts. And then the big one, 80% of the shares in the cybersecurity company William had built from scratch, which the valuation summary put well into the tens of millions. My parents' eyes grew round, then greedy. And all of that, Mr. Harrison said, is left to Sophia Bennett. In full. The silence that followed was almost funny. My mother blinked, catching up. My father frowned like he'd misheard. I'm sorry, my dad said finally. All of it? That can't be right. We're his family. My mother recovered faster, leaning forward, folding her hands. We don't want to be difficult, she said. But obviously we're going to be involved. We should manage this together. She's still young. Handling millions requires guidance. That word made something in me snap. Guidance. I repeated. Is that what you call walking out when I was 16 and leaving me with a rotten carton of milk and a note? My mother's smile twitched, but she kept it plastered on. We were struggling, she said quickly. We knew your uncle would help. We did what was best for you. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat softly, drawing the focus back to him. There are some additional provisions Mr. Bennett insisted I address, if this situation occurred. That got their attention. What situation? My dad demanded. The lawyer opened a second folder, thinner but somehow heavier. First, he said, looking directly at them, 9 years ago when Sophia turned 18, Mr. Bennett formally adopted her. Legally, she is his daughter. His sole heir. He let that sit for a moment. You are, in the eyes of the law, her biological parents, but you have no automatic claim to his estate. You are not his dependents, nor are you named anywhere as beneficiaries. My father's face flushed red. He stole our kid, he snapped. We never agreed to that. Mr. Harrison pulled out a document and slid it across the table toward them. You signed the consent forms, he said evenly. I have your signatures on file. You received a copy at the time. My mother's eyes flicked over the paper, then she shoved it back. We didn't understand what we were signing, she said. We thought it was temporary guardianship. It was not, the lawyer replied. And even if it were, your actions afterward made the court's decision quite simple. He opened another file, this one full of printed emails. Mr. Bennett also asked that, if necessary, I disclose the communications he received from you over the years. Requests for money, threats to show up at his office, demands that he share what he owed you, or you would, and I quote, tell everyone what kind of person he really is. As he read the line, my mother shot to her feet. Those were private, she snapped. You can't just. I can, he cut in calmly, because Mr. Bennett anticipated you might come back exactly like this. Which brings us to the final clause of his will. My parents both froze, like animals sensing a trap but too late to get away. Mr. Harrison folded his hands. In the event that any party with legal standing attempts to contest this will or otherwise challenge the distribution of assets in court, the entirety of the estate, every house, every account, every share of stock, will be liquidated and transferred to the Bennett Children's Oncology Fund, a charitable foundation established for pediatric cancer patients. He paused. In plain English, if anyone tries to sue for a piece of this, no one keeps any of it. Not even Sophia. The money goes to sick children instead. For a second no one breathed. Then my father let out a short, harsh laugh. He can't do that, he said. That's insane. He can, Mr. Harrison replied. And he did. The clause has been reviewed. It is legally sound. My mother turned to me, her fake smile gone, eyes sharp. You wouldn't let that happen, she said, her voice low and urgent. You wouldn't risk losing everything just to keep it from your own parents. I looked at her. You lost me a long time ago, I said quietly. William made sure you couldn't take what he built too. She slammed her hand on the table. We raised you, she hissed. We changed your diapers. We sacrificed for you. We deserve something. A few million at least. The entitlement in her voice almost made me laugh. You left me with 37 cents in my bank account, I replied. And a landlord ready to throw me out. You didn't just walk away. You made sure there was nothing left. Mr. Harrison closed the folder with a soft thud. There is nothing for you here, he said to them. You are not beneficiaries. You have no claim. And if you attempt to create one, you risk depriving Sophia and every other intended recipient of this estate. That was Mr. Bennett's express intent. My father pushed his chair back so hard it screeched. We'll see about that, he snapped. We'll get our own lawyer. This isn't over. My mother stood too, pointing a shaking finger at me. You'll regret siding with him over your own blood, she spat. You can't cut us out forever. We're family. You only remember that word when there's money around, I said. Funny coincidence. Mr. Harrison pressed a discreet button under the edge of the table. Moments later, a building security guard appeared at the door, tall and impassive. Is everything all right, sir? He asked. Yes, Mr. Harrison said. But our meeting is concluded. Please escort our guests out. Watching my parents get walked out of that glass office, sputtering threats and half-finished sentences while the receptionist and a couple of junior associates looked on, was the first time I truly understood what William had done for me. He hadn't just left me money. He'd built a firewall around my life and coded a nuclear option into his will so their greed could never break through. If you're still watching, smash that like button and subscribe, because what happens next is where my parents completely lose it. We're talking trespassing, arrests, and a courtroom scene that destroys them publicly. Comment below. Do you think my uncle went too far with that clause, or was it perfect? Me know. Of course, they didn't give up. A week later, I got an email from a law firm I'd never heard of, full of fake politeness and veiled demands for amicable renegotiation. They'd clearly already been told the will was ironclad. They were fishing for fear. They didn't get it. Mr. Harrison responded on my behalf, attaching the clause again, this time with a short note. Any attempt to challenge the will result in Sophia joining the firm in requesting immediate execution of the charitable transfer. After that, their lawyer went quiet. My parents didn't. They called from blocked numbers. They sent tearful voicemails about being sick, about bills, about just needing a little help. Finally, my mother texted me directly, begging me to meet them for dinner, to talk like a family. In a moment of curiosity, or weakness, I agreed. We met at a mid-range Italian restaurant near downtown, the kind with dim lighting and soft music meant to make everyone feel generous. They were already at the table when I walked in. Menus untouched. My mother grabbed my hand like we were close. "You look tired," she said. "All that responsibility, it's too much for one person. You shouldn't have to carry it alone." My father cleared his throat. "We just need a little help, Sophia," he said. "We're behind on some things. Medical bills, the house. If you could spare $200,000, maybe just to get us caught up." "You demanded millions in that office," I said, sliding into my seat. $200,000 sounds like a discount." My mother winced. "We were emotional," she said. "Grief does strange things. He was your uncle, but he was our family too." "You didn't come to the funeral," I reminded her. She didn't answer. Instead, she launched into a story about my father's health, about letters from collection agencies, about how they might lose their home. "We're not asking for everything," she said finally, voice trembling just enough to sound rehearsed. "Just a piece. We're your parents." I set my fork down and met her eyes. "Parents don't abandon their kid and then come back with a calculator when there's money on the table," I said. "You didn't show up when I was hungry or scared or one step from being homeless. You only showed up when you heard the word millions." My father bristled. "So that's it," he said. "You're going to let us drown while you sit on a fortune?" "No," I said. "I'm going to let you live with the consequences of your choices, the way you forced me to live with mine. William gave me a life and he built protection so you couldn't tear it apart out of greed. I'm honoring that." My mother's face hardened, all pretense gone. "One day you'll need something," she said quietly. "And there won't be anyone left to help you." I thought of William's hand in mine as he died. Of the way he'd shown up when no one else did. "Someone already taught me how to stand on my own," I said. "That's the difference between you and him. He left me tools. You left me a note." I stood up, dropped enough cash on the table to cover my meal, and walked out before they could say anything else. Behind me, their voices rose, then faded into the restaurant noise. I didn't look back. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. For people who'd already lost their shot at millions, they were still dangerously sure they could push their way back into my life. Okay, if this story has you on the edge of your seat, please like and subscribe because the final part involves cameras, police, arrests, and my parents' lives completely unraveling. Comment. Would you have given them anything or done exactly what I did? I need to know. The first sign that my parents weren't done came a week after that disastrous dinner. I was in my home office reviewing security reports when my phone buzzed with a notification from the camera app. Motion detected. Front gate. I tapped it without thinking and froze. There they were. My mother in a cheap jacket over that same navy dress, my father in the same wrinkled suit, both standing at my gate like they owned the driveway. I watched them on my screen as they punched in the gate code I'd already changed, frowned when it didn't work, then simply waited until another car pulled in, and slipped through behind it. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered. I switched to the other cameras. They walked up the path, my mother's smile already plastered on, my father looking around like he was inspecting property he planned to sell. By the time they rang the doorbell, I was already hitting record. I opened the door just enough to step into the frame, phone in hand. "You're violating the restraining order," I said calmly. "You shouldn't be within 500 feet of me or this house." My mother laughed like I'd told a joke. "Oh, come on, Sophia," she said. "We're just here to talk. No need to be dramatic. We're family." Behind her, my father tried to peer past me into the foyer, his eyes sweeping over the staircase, the artwork, the evidence that my life had gone very well without them. "Nice place," he said. "You really going to keep all this and let us lose everything?" "You lost me at 16, I said. "Everything else is just follow through." My mother's smile dropped. "We're not leaving," she snapped. "Not until you listen. Not until you help." "Then this is going to get worse for you," I said. I held up my phone so the screen with the camera feed was visible. "You see that little red light? That means this is being recorded. Every word. Every step past the property line." I stepped back and closed the door. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. I opened the security app, saved the clip, and called the police. When the officers arrived, my parents were still in the front yard, arguing with the stone lions by the steps. I watched from the window as the officers approached, spoke to them, then came to my door. I showed them the restraining order, the video of my parents slipping through the gate, the timestamps. It was all very simple after that. Trespassing, violation of a court order, refusal to leave when asked. They tried every angle. My mother cried. My father argued. They said I was overreacting, that this was a family matter, that surely the officers had better things to do. The officers stayed professional and unmoved. Handcuffs clicked. My parents were led down the driveway, this time with real consequences attached. The neighbors watched from their porches and windows. Phones came out. Clips got recorded. By the end of the week, the story hit a local news site. It wasn't a front-page scandal, but it was loud enough. Parents who abandoned daughter at 16 arrested after violating restraining order near her home. Allegations they attempted to access inheritance from late tech entrepreneur uncle. The article linked to court documents, mentioned my company, mentioned the scholarship fund William had set up in his will for kids with cancer once certain financial benchmarks were met. It did not mention my parents' names kindly. Their lives unraveled quickly. My father lost his job at the garage when the owner decided he didn't need the attention or the drama. My mother's already fragile hold on public sympathy snapped. Whatever help she'd been getting from programs and friends dried up when people realized she'd once walked away from a teenage daughter, and then come back only when the word millions was on the table. At the next hearing, the judge made it clear. Any contact outside legal channels would mean jail time, not just fines and probation. I sat in the courtroom and watched my parents shrink a little more every time the judge spoke William's name with respect, and theirs with thinly veiled disgust. When it was over, I walked out past them without a word. There was nothing left to say. Back at the company, I threw myself into work, not to escape but to build. I expanded our security services, hired people William would have respected, and refused offers to sell when investors dangled absurd numbers. Instead, I took some of the profits and created a scholarship program in William's name for kids who grew up like I did, standing in kitchens with empty fridges and no one coming through the door. We gave them laptops, mentorship, tuition help, real tools, the kind William believed in. Months later, one of my cameras pinged late at night. I opened the app and saw my parents' car crawl slowly past the gate, headlights off, never stopping, just rolling by like they were looking at a museum of a life that could have been theirs if they'd chosen differently. They looked smaller somehow. Not like villains. Not like monsters. Just people who had gambled everything on selfishness, and lost. That was the moment I understood something important. Revenge isn't always about making someone suffer. Sometimes it's simply about refusing to let what they did define you. William didn't save me so I could spend my life stuck in the wreckage of their choices. He saved me so I could walk out, build something better, and maybe hold the door open for somebody else. People love to say, blood is thicker than water. But blood didn't show up when I was hungry or cold or alone. A man with no obligation did. Family, I learned, is the person who stays when it would be easier to leave. The one who gives you tools instead of excuses. If the people who hurt you came back only when you had something they wanted, would you let them in just because you share a last name? Or would you finally lock the door, protect what you've built, and choose a different kind of family for yourself? If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear that you don't owe toxic family anything just because of DNA. And drop a comment. What does family really mean to you? I want to hear your thoughts. Thank you for watching. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Remember that.